Okay, chapter 15, oligopolies. Who wants to start out? What is an oligopoly?
The market structure in which natural or legal barriers prevent the entry of new firms and only a small number of firms compete.
An oligopoly is the market structure in which there are no natural legal barriers preventing the entry of new firms, and one that's a number of small firms compete. What do we mean by barriers to entry?
Things that prevent people from joining the market.
Things that prevent people from joining the market. All right, so let's take a look at this. We say that it can either, oligopolies can either be natural or legal barriers to entry can create. All right, so let's look at this graph. And let's put some numbers up here. What are we staring at here?
The supply and demand curve for the oligopoly.
Well, we definitely see a demand curve.
But you've got an average total cost and demand curve.
Average total cost and a demand curve. All right. In part A, what we have here, what's the average minimum price of producing, or average total cost? So we got the average total cost curve and the demand curve. What's the average total cost of producing a ride? $10. So the average total cost of producing a ride is $10. So $10 is the lowest price that a firm can charge. Now let's recap. We're going to assume here, what's the chief end of every corporation, every organization?
Maximize profit.
To maximize profit. So if we're going to maximize profit in this case, $10 is the lowest amount that we can charge. All right, so when a firm produces the efficient number at $10, you see that we are producing 30 rides. Where is the demand though at $10?
60 rides per day.
At $60. So we can see that two firms can meet the market demand. We call this a natural duopoly. Now let's look at three firms. What would happen if we add the three firms? Again, we see that the efficient scale of the firm is 20 rides per day. So if we put the efficient scale at 20, we see where now three firms are going to, if two firms, in this example, if we only had two firms and each was producing two, we would see the quantity would only be at 40 rides per day. We would still have wasted the last third, 20 rides. This would be viewed as an attractive opportunity for a third firm to come into the market. So a third firm would enter into this market. There's no barrier against. The third firm would come in and fill up this shortage. Now we say it's one in which a number of small firms compete. All right, so what we're saying, because an oligopoly market has only a few firms, and remember, because we have a small number, they are interdependent. And if your chief goal is to maximize profit, we're going to say that you could be tempted to cooperate with one another. And I'm going to say you could be tempted. We're going to hold on the view that market manipulation is not a good thing. These firms are interdependent with one another. When a small number of firms, each firm's profit depends on every firm's actions. All right, so based on this temptation, firms in oligopoly, if we do agree to cooperate with one another, we are going to form a cartel. And cartels are illegal. All right, now think about this. Can you all think of oligopolies that you buy from?
Would like a cell phone carrier be considered an oligopoly, since there's only like, I can only think of like 5 carriers.
All right, so we just talked about cell phone carriers. I would definitely say who you buy your cell phone carrier through, your service through. This is a legal oligopoly. What else?
How about cable TV and internet?
Cable TV and internet, definitely.
Could like the area that you live in, like the trash people, like you only
Trash
have,
people.
You only have so many trash men, garbage men for an area that you can choose from.
Let's say garbage people.
Garbage people. I don't know what they're called. I don't know the legal term.
Yeah, but
Facility services.
Yeah, there we go.
sanitation workers.
There we go. That's the politically correct term.
Okay, so definitely. You see where right now your household is supporting oligopolies. Here's an interesting statistic. Cable television, entertainment, music and film, airlines. So when I talk about entertainment, I was referring to music and film. Airlines, mass media, pharmaceuticals, computer and software applications, mobile phones. Let's say mobile phone services, smartphone operating systems, aluminum, steel, oil and gas. Definitely would all be good and prime examples of oligopolies in our world. Consider this: national mass media and service outlets. Right now, 90% of those industries are controlled by only 6 corporations. I don't want to sound like I'm speaking fake news or spreading fake news, but right now we see that term a lot in society, but national mass media and news outlets are controlled by 90%, or 90% controlled by 6 firms. Those 6 firms include Walt Disney Corporation, Time Warner, Viacom, NBC Universal, and News Corp. I just cited the Wall Street Journal in our opening discussion. I look at the top, Dow Jones, a News Corp corporation. So good examples. All right, let's take a look at some oligopoly games. And did you all know we were going to play games today? And games that oligopolies can play. All right, in economics, when we talk about games, we will refer to game theory, a tool for studying strategic behavior, which is a behavior that takes into account the expected behavior of others and the mutual recognition of independence. All games have 4 common features. These include rules, strategies, payoffs, and outcomes. First game I'm going to introduce to you is called the prisoner's theory. And remember, a lot of these, when we go through this, this is going to shape how decisions are made. Remember, it's a strategic planning exercise. So in the prisoner's dilemma, we're going to have 2 prisoners named Art and Bob. Both have been caught committing a petty crime. Now here are our rules. Each player is held in a separate cell and cannot communicate with the other. If you look in the weekly materials, you're going to see Dr. Russ present this even in an example of using Coke and Pepsi from a corporate twist on it. So this is used in corporate strategic planning. Now, each is told that they are suspected of committing a more serious crime. If one of them confesses, he will get a 1-year sentence for cooperating, while his accomplice will get a 10-year sentence for both crimes. If both confess to the more serious crime, each will receive a 3-year sentence for both crimes. If neither confesses, each will receive a 2-year sentence for the minor crime only. So what are the strategies of the game? Art and Bob can either confess to the larger crime, or they can deny having committed the larger crime. All right, let's look at, we're going to start applying a matrix here. But with 2 players, 2 actions, we know there are 4 possible outcomes. Both could confess. Both could deny. Art could confess and Bob could deny. Or Bob could confess and Art could deny. The payoffs. Each prisoner can work out what happens to him. They can work it out in a payoff, and they know that it's going to be one of 4 possible outcomes. And as I said, we're going to illustrate this using a payoff matrix, and this is going to show us every possible action by each player for every possible action for the other player. Okay, so here is our payoff matrix. Payoff. I'm thinking of them. See, I got sports on. NHL last night, NBA coming up. I'm still in a sports mode. Okay, so here we see our payoff matrix. Everyone, if Bob confesses and Art confesses, what happens?
Both get 3 years.
What happens if Art denies and Bob confesses?
Art denies. Did you say if Art denies?
Correct. If Art denies and Bob confesses,
Art gets 10 years.
who agrees Art gets 10 years? Come on, let's have some participation. What you're seeing here is a basic two-way payoff, a 2x2 matrix. You could easily expand this out to 3x3, 4x4, 5x5, and so on. We're going to take a simple approach to the introduction, applying a two-sided. Does everyone know how to read and interpret this matrix? All right, remember, Art, we can see Art's numbers here in the, well, we're just going to say red and blue, and Bob in the blue. Now the outcome, if a player makes a rational choice in pursuit of his own best interest, he chooses the action that is best for him, given any action taken by the other player. I just opened up the Nash Equilibrium. And first proposed by John Nash states that players are rational and will choose actions in this way. And we're going to choose actions that are best for me, given any outcome, any action taken by you. So Bob's going to act in his own self-interest. How do we find the Nash Equilibrium? Let's look at it from Bob's view of the world. All right, so from Bob's view, again, if Bob confesses and Art confesses, what's the outcome?
3 each.
3 each. So Bob has two choices. He can confess or deny. If he denies and Art denies, what happens?
He gets 10. You mean if Art confesses?
Wisconsin, you with me?
Yep. So if Bob denies and Art confesses, it would be 10 years to Bob and 1 year to Art.
There you go. All right, now, what if Bob confesses and Art, let's see here, if Bob denies and Art denies?
2 years each.
2 years each. Now, from Art's view of the world, if Art confesses and Bob confesses, what happens?
3 years.
Each.
Still 3 years. Now, if Art denies and you see Bob denies, what happens?
2 and 2.
That was their outcome. All right, here's this Nash Equilibrium. We're going to call the Nash Equilibrium as an example of a dominant strategy equilibrium. An equilibrium in which the best strategy of each player is to cheat, regardless of the strategy of another player. Remember, they're going to look and cheat and pursue their own self-interest, regardless of what the other party does.
This doesn't take into account snitches get stitches.
Snitches get stitches. We're not going to say that. But I guess we just did. It's recorded. All right, so the dilemma arises. Each player's got to contemplate the consequences of his decision and how this puts him in the place of his accomplice. Each knows that they would be best if both denied. But remember, we've got them locked in a cell. We're not allowing them to speak to one another. Is it worth risking? Is it worth denying, risking that the other party will also deny? You're taking a chance. And that is what leads to the equilibrium of the game. And I look at a bad outcome. We never said that the Nash Equilibrium was the best outcome. Remember, if we'd allowed them to speak and they could have collaborated and said, hey, let's both deny. But again, remember, we're going to say that those type of actions are what is the basis of forming a cartel. So without knowing what your other party is going to do, now again, if I was applying a corporate twist to this, think about the Coke and Pepsi example. If Coca-Cola is setting their advertising budget and Coke's chief competitor being PepsiCo, if Coke wants to shoot the moon and blow the wad, spend all their money on marketing, hire, help me out, Katy Perry, Kanye West, you can tell I don't listen to most modern music, Justin Bieber, and you hire these individuals, would Coke want to do that if they thought Pepsi would not? If both could get together, and remember, you don't want to spend money on advertising. Coke doesn't want to spend money on advertising if they don't need to. But without collaboration and not knowing what the other party is going to do, Coke must do what's in their best interest, regardless of whatever action PepsiCo would take. In this case, Art and Bob must make their own individual decisions based on their own individual best interest, regardless of what action is taken by the other. So both denying, each would get a 2-year sentence. That is the best outcome. But because they don't know, that is not the equilibrium outcome. Now this begs to ask, can we get a better outcome? And I just answered that by saying no, because we're not going to allow them to talk. And again, talking is the basis of cartels, and cartels are illegal. Any questions about the prisoner's dilemma? All right, let's look at an example of a price fixing game. And again, we're going to assume price fixing is no-no. Okay, a duopoly, a market in which there are only 2 producers that compete. All right, let's look at some graphs. Here we're looking at 2 firms, an individual firm in the industry, and we're looking at cost curves. So we've got marginal cost and average total cost. Part B is going to show the market demand curve. So again, this industry we're going to assume is a natural duopoly. Two firms can meet the market demand at the least cost. So we're going to say they are efficient. And how will this market work? All right, now let's assume that the 2 firms enter into a collusive agreement. Remember, they're going to decide, they get together behind the back boardroom, behind the back alleys, and they decide they're going to price fix. So this is what we would call a collusive agreement. And we say that they are illegal in the United States and therefore undertaken in secret, hence this meeting. We'll stop the video recording and we can have our meeting.
How much of that do you really think goes on? Like,
How much of that does really go on?
Do you really think that like there's some Pepsi and Coca-Cola insiders are like, yo bro, guess what we're gonna do?
I would think whatever amount's profitable and not prosecuted, that would be the level at which it would stop.
I just wonder like how much of like, if you had to guess like a percentage of like big name companies that we know, that are doing some like secret undercover cartel stuff. What do you think the percentage is higher than what we expect, or do you think it's like 10%?
Or that you're saying,
Like-
what do we expect? And I'm sure each individual in this class, we would have different expectations. I couldn't even estimate. I couldn't even form a basis to know what happens. I mean, I will say that I would not dispute that it does happen, but to what frequency and at what level, I wouldn't know. All right. So, strategies that we can pursue. Comply or cheat. So if you are presented with a price fixing opportunity, you can comply with it or you can cheat it. And again, because you have two strategies and we have two firms here where we're assuming this is a duopoly, we're going to have 4 possible combinations of actions. Both could comply, both could cheat. Trick, we're going to introduce these companies as Trick and Gear. Trick could comply, Gear could cheat, or Gear could comply and Trick could cheat. All right, firms in a cartel act like a monopoly. Now they are going to maximize economic profit. And to find that profit, they're going to set a marginal cost equal to marginal revenue. What I'm doing is getting it all up on the board here. Now let's assume each firm agrees to produce 2,000 units and share the wealth. The blue box is going to show our economic profit. Now, when a firm produces 2,000 units, the price is greater than the firm's marginal cost. So if one firm increases output, its profit would increase. Okay, so they're holding just below. If one person steps up and starts to increase output, what's happening?
Increase profit.
It's going to earn a larger share. Now, suppose the cheat increases. So we're going to say they increase output. Let's assume they increase it up to 3,000 units. Industry output is going to increase to 5,000 and the price is going to fall. Cheat, the price exceeds the average total cost. And the complier, the one who stuck with the agreement, is going to bear the economic loss. Now, what happens if both firms cheat?
Then it's, we could do a match.
Well, does that mean that both firms would be overproducing?
Well, it just means that both firms are not going to honor their agreement. All right, so see, let's what happens. Suppose now that both increased their output to 3,000 units. So whereas before, if we go back to this example of when one cheated, all right, so right here, we've got one cheating and increasing output to 3,000. And we say that the cheat is going to benefit and the complier is going to bear the economic loss. We can interpret this if we wanted to define what this economic loss actually was. Let's interpret this a little deeper. Look at slide B. So this is our, in B, we've got one complier and we've got one cheater. All right, so the cheater, we're going to say increase to 2,000. Look down on the horizontal axis, increased output out to 3,000 units. Market demand over in chart C, market demand grows out to 5,000 units, switch gears per week. All right, and the price falls when industry quantity increases out to 5,000, price falls down to $7.50. So the complier, what is the amount of the complier's loss?
Would it be 50 cents per unit?
Yeah, but we're quoting this in $1,000 per unit. So instead of 50 cents, $500. If you look over here, $1,000, thousands of dollars per unit. So these are quoted in thousands. So you're right, he's giving up 500. Now, how many units decreased? How many more units did the cheater take? Well, the cheater pushed output out by 2,000 units.
So would that cause a shift in the supply curve? Is that why the price drops?
Well, it would push you longer down on the demand curve. So with the supply, yes, we're increasing supply. The demand is out there to meet it.
Okay.
So when we increase supply, the price is going to fall. The individual who has initiated that output change is who's going to reap the benefits. In this case, the cheater. So the cheater is going to push production out 2,000 units. They're going to gain that 2,000 units. When they do that, the price is going to fall by $500 a unit. So we could take 2,000 units multiplied by $500 a unit, and what was the revenue they just realized? Well, if you're looking at it from the complier, 500 multiplied by 2,000, $1 million, that would be the economic loss to the complier. And that $1 million, is there any questions there? All right, let's jump back in and look when both firms cheat. All right, so now we've got an example. Individual firms switch gears. We're using the same examples. Now, suppose that both firms increase their output to 3,000. Industry output, when we push it to 6,000 units, we just realized that, or observed that the price is going to fall. Both firms make zero economic profit because this is going to create the same situation as if we were perfectly competitive. Now, both firms cheating. Look over in. How could both firms make zero economic profit?
Would it be because their marginal cost is meeting the demand curve?
Well, you see that the average total cost, no firm, if you look here, no firm would produce more than 6,000 units. And if that was you, Brian, I think that's what you just said. The reason being, your marginal cost, you are right there at an efficient output at 6,000 units. So no firm is going to produce more than 6,000 units here. If we do produce more than 6,000 units, total cost, we're going to incur a loss. So in section A, each firm, if each firm is producing 3,000 units, we just met the lowest level. Give me 1 second here. Would you agree that it'd be a lot easier if you just knew what the competition was doing?
Yeah.
What do you think would happen? Each company right now has agreed to put out 3,000 units, industry output at 6,000. We're still looking at a duopoly now. What would happen if a third firm entered the market?
Might decrease the cheating.
It would also decrease the amount of revenue that the two existing companies could capture.
Right.
But remember, if the industry right now is at 6,000 and we say that's the lowest level that a firm would produce, because production of any more, a firm would bear a loss. If a third firm entered the industry, somebody would get squeezed. If you're looking at this chart, industry demand is only at 6,000. If right now two are achieving competitive outcomes by producing 3,000 each, they're achieving that efficiency. If a third firm entered, someone's going to get squeezed out. The industry achieved efficiency is at 6,000. They would not have any production level that they could produce. Y'all are making that a little bit more complicated. This is a fun lesson. No, I'm not going to throw any trick ponies at you, no curveballs. All right, again, we could apply a payoff matrix here. All right, other oligopoly games include advertising and research and R&B game.
Research and development.
And we are going to slide over and look at a game of chicken. Okay, I hear some laughter here. All right, let's play a game of chicken. All right, an economic game of chicken can arise when R&D firms creates new technology that cannot be patented. Now let's think about this. So develop new technology that you can't patent. Now both firms can benefit from the R&D of the either firm. You know, it's interesting, reading an article today where Facebook is investing so heavily in AI initiatives and looking at ways that they might even be able to put, they say they're not going to do a brain transplant, but they've got this secret building. I forget what it was labeled, but there's a team of individuals that are out there and doing nothing but research on how they could create technology that would read brain waves. Now, think about if that was launched, how many firms would quickly jump on that? Think of how many of their competitors would take that and start to tweak or put their own twist on it. But now let's just assume that our government said they were not going to allow them to patent that technology. What would they do? All right, so let's go through an example of Apple and Nokia. Funny seeing Nokia up here right now, but. All right, so suppose that either Apple or Nokia spends $9 million developing new screen touch technology that both would end up being able to use regardless of which firm spends the $9 million. So both firms realize the need to come up with new technology. Both realizes that it's going to cost $9 million. But who wants to spend it? Why would Apple want to spend it?
To say that they were first in developing it? Or
Well, they would say that they were first, but they would then bear the cost, and remember, maximizing profit. They would bear an expense or a cost of $9 million. Nokia would get the rights to that technology and be able to use it without making that capital expenditure. So Apple strategies. All right, so what Apple can do? They can invest where we see R&D or no R&D. So one strategy would be that Apple and Nokia both invest money. Both could invest no money down here. Down here. Nokia can invest 10 million. Apple could bear the larger cost. All right, if Apple does the research and development, Nokia, best strategy is not to do. We agree they'd be able to take full advantage of the new technology without incurring the cost. If Apple does no R&D, Nokia's best strategy is to do it. If Nokia does R&D, Apple's best strategy is not to do it. And if Nokia does R&D, Apple's best strategy is to do it. So the equilibrium for this game is for one firm to do the R&D. So if one firm does the R&D, are they both better off? Are they both better off if no one does the R&D?
I mean,
Well, they haven't spent any money, but they also haven't realized that new technology. So neither would be better off.
Neither would be better off, so we can cross that out. And we said that the best outcome now here are Apple's best strategies. Remember, we're using the word best, not the equilibrium outcome. So if Nokia does R&D, Apple's best strategy is not to do it. Okay, if Nokia is going to do it, Apple not do it, they don't have the capital expenditure, they get the benefit. If Nokia does no R&D, Apple's best strategy is to do it. So remember, we are looking for the outcome that is in our own best interest, regardless of the action taken by the other party. So we'll say the other player since we're using a game. Okay. In the presentation, you will find that this takes you through a couple more games, one involving a price war. And I'm going to pick back up right here. All right, a contestable market. A contestable market, a market in which firms can enter and leave so easily. Firms in the market face competition from potential entrants. When we have this type of example, we say that firms play a sequential entry game. And let's look at this. I'm going to use Agile and who's the other player? Wannabe. Now in the first stage, Apple decides whether to set a monopoly price or the competitive price. So remember, someone can easily just jump in. Do they want to be a market leader, or do they want to take a market lead? Or say, do they want to take a proactive or a reactive stance? So first stage, do they want to set a monopoly price or a competitive price?
So they want to set a monopoly price, if they're the only firm.
Now the second stage, if someone, let's say Wannabe comes in now. Now Wannabe decides whether they want to enter the market or stay out. Now if Agile sets the monopoly price, Wannabe enters the market. If they stay in the market, we see our matrix, their payoff. If Wannabe stays out of the market, their payoff is 0. Stay in the market, profit is 90, so they're going to take market share here from Agile. Now under a competitive pricing point, Wannabe enters the market. If they enter, what's their payoff? Everybody's losing. And how would you interpret if Wannabe stays out?
It's not gonna affect anybody.
No one's making any dough. So the equilibrium was set. Go back a slide. All right, where's the equilibrium set?
Equilibrium when Agile sets a competitive price and makes 0 profit. We want to be out.
If they are setting a competitive price, they're not realizing, but they are keeping out the competition. Okay, a less costly strategy would be one that involved limit pricing, which sets the price at the highest level that is consistent with keeping any potential entrant out. All right, now the question was asked earlier, how much does price, do cartels exist and backroom decisions? I said I couldn't answer, but let's take a look at some ways that our government does use methods and laws we use to enforce. Antitrust laws is how we regulate oligopolies and prevents them from becoming monopolies or even behaving like monopolies. So remember, if these oligopolies are left untouched and unscathed and left out under review, they can form into some of these other more narrow forms of monopolies. Remember, we use the Herfindahl Index when we decide whether or not monopolies exist or whether or not a monopoly is slowly forming. Okay, we would still use the Herfindahl Index in order to review oligopolies. Antitrust laws. First, we're going to look at the Sherman Act of 1890 and the Clayton Act of 1914. Sherman Act comes in two sections. The Sherman Act outlawed any combination, trust, or conspiracy that restricted interstate trade and prohibited the attempt to monopolize. All right, and what started the Clayton Act? Was it the early start of the 20th century? We started seeing a lot of M&A activity. The Clayton Act was formed and created the FTC. And the Clayton Act states in its abbreviated form, it made it illegal for specific business practices such as price discrimination, interlocking directorships, and acquisition of a competitor's shares if the practices substantially lessen competition or create monopoly. You know, we're going to talk about here in the next chapter, distribution of public goods and consumption of public goods. And one thing that we'll talk about is healthcare. And we've seen a lot of, you know, here in Louisville, Kentucky, home of Humana, just north of us in Indianapolis, you know, United Healthcare has a very large presence, and Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield has large presences throughout our area. A lot of hospitals here. And so Louisville is known for its medical care sites, both insurance and actual treatment facilities. And I can say that the Clayton Act, when I look back and seen where a merger that was just voted down was between Humana and Aetna. And the Clayton Act was one that some political reviewers cited as it would substantially lessen competition. Now, their concern was that it would lessen that competition within the Medicare side. And again, that's going to be a good transition into, you know, where we go into the next chapter. But both of these laws, as we see the stock market increasing, reaching new highs, as we see competition becoming fierce as ever, it's not uncommon that you'll still see these two laws cited and these two laws being used and reading examples of how they regulate free trade here in the United States. Price fixing, always a violation in an antitrust. If the Justice Department can prove the existing, note there is no self-defense. Some practices are more controversial and generate debate. 3 of them include resale price maintenance, tying arrangements, and predatory pricing. Resale price maintenance plans, we'll say practices. Manufacturers sell their product to the final consumer through a wholesale and retail distribution chain. Okay, when a manufacturer agrees with the distributor on the price at which the price will be resold. Think of Walmart. Think of a supplier getting so large that they could go into Walmart and say, we'll put our product on your shelf, but this is what you must sell it for. Or if they got with Walmart and said, hey, build yourself a profit in there. We're not going to look at supply and demand laws. We're just going to set a price. We're going to manipulate that price, and you've got to set it at this level. You got to ensure that I make a profit. I'm going to ensure that you make a profit. Now, yes, best interests are that we go in there to achieve those 2 goals, but we let normal market and legal market cycles determine whether or not we reach that goal. And it says inefficient because it does promote monopoly pricing. We're controlling the price in which it is sold. Tying arrangements. Agreement to sell one product only if the buyer buys another product as well. Imagine you went to your local car lot and you decided that you were going to buy that new Ford Explorer. And Ford told you that they would own, that dealership told you they would only sell that to you if you agreed to a 5-year maintenance plan. Or they would only sell that car to you if you agree to buy a car of lesser value. Think of iPhone saying they were going to sell you a phone only if you bought service through AT&T. And I'm citing that because remember that practice at one time, iPhones were only being distributed through AT&T, and that was one that raised some eyebrows. Predatory pricing, probably the worst of the three. Setting a low price to drive out competitors with the intention of then setting the monopoly price. Usually done by stronger, more established firms with deeper cash pockets, deeper pockets full of cash that can afford to even incur a short-term loss in order to keep the price low and squeeze out all competition. The idea is once you have squeezed out all competition, you will then raise the price back up and set a monopoly price. All right. Any questions? All right, we'll stop right there.